we're talking about something a bit more positive, which is how to use your property equity to make money. So I designed this session for people that already have property and want to leverage what they've already got to get more out of what they've had. So I'm going to come through some of the key sort of tips, hacks, and strategies, and the things that you should be thinking about when you go down this path to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. So just before I kick off, can you guys just let me know that sound's coming through okay, and you can see my slides here as well? That would be awesome. Just pop that into the chat. Great. Someone? Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Tony. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate that. Okay, guys. So look, firstly, big shout out to our event partners, General Assembly for hosting, and Raiz Home Ownership. If you're not super familiar with what they do, get around it because they're doing some pretty cool stuff. So thank you guys for putting this on. And look, just before I get into the content as well, but guys, please don't rush out and make any life-changing decisions off the back of this presentation. I strongly encourage you to seek out personalized advice before jumping in, and you should really be doing that anyway. So look, what I've found is, and this applies to property, but for your money, just overall as well, that everyone's situation is really unique, but there are some common challenges that people face when it comes to their money. And these are the three that I've got here that there's so much information out there in the property space in particular, but with all things that come to money, that there's so much noise, conflicting opinions, hidden agendas, and it's almost like you're sort of drinking from the fire hose. It's hard to know who to listen to and who to trust. The second one that we got here is that people really struggling to find balance between how do you make smart financial decisions and get ahead at the rate that you want while you actually live the lifestyle that you want. So it's a lack of balance. And then we've got the FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. It's driving a lot of stuff in the property market at the moment. We're seeing tons of activity there, driven by the ultra low interest rates. And I think maybe people with a little bit more time on their hands with working from their COVID bunkers a bit more than they were in the past. And then there's also got this FOFU, which is the fear of fucking up, basically, the fear of making a mistake that will cost you money, especially with property. We're talking about really big decisions here, so it becomes more impactful. And what happens as a result of this is that you just end up stuck, and it's stuck, not always stuck doing nothing. Sometimes it's just stuck doing the same thing that you're doing in the past. But what that means is that you're ultimately missing the opportunity to be getting better results and getting more out of what you have. So what we've found, and today we're talking specifically about property, but when you think about property and your money strategy more broadly, there are three key elements that you really need to be getting right to get great results. And I've got those up here, which is your structure, strategy, and solution. So your structure is all about making it really easy to save and making it easy to manage your money. But really importantly, when it comes to property, it's about making it crystal clear how much money you have to work with when it comes to strategies like buying property, paying down debt. What's your situation going to look like post the property purchase as well? And then that ties into the next element, which is strategy. And that's like understanding the different options or the different pathways that are available to you: buying the investment property, buying the stepping stone property, buying the dream home, investing, doing some other non-property strategies that we'll talk about, cranking your super, debt recycling, investing, that sort of stuff. Solutions is all about the investments that you choose. So making sure that you've got investments that give you reliable, consistent progress and avoid the chances of those downsides and setbacks, those momentum killing mistakes, because this applies to property as well as non-property investments like shares, ETFs, superannuation as well. But that's mission critical. And with these three elements, that there's the power of the three combined is much better than the whole. And if any one of the elements is missing, it ends up dragging on the rest. If you've got a good structure and a good strategy, but bad investments, you blow up your cash. Good investments and a good strategy with a bad structure, it's hard to have a good strategy without a good structure, because you don't know what you've got to work with. And if you've got a good structure and good solutions, but you've got no strategy, probably leaving money on the table, and you're certainly going to be leaving confidence on the table and not having that peace of mind that you should. So we'll talk a bit about how you can incorporate these three, but when you're going down the property path, a lot of people get caught up thinking that being a good property investor is about choosing a great property, but it's not just about that. It's about having a great investment, but having a great strategy around the investment so that you've got the exact right amount of property for you, that your debt levels are set up in the right way that allow you to live the lifestyle that you want and do all of the make the progress that you want beyond just purchasing that property. All of those things are all a necessary part of choosing having being a great property investor. So we'll talk more about those, but before I do, I'll just show, and for anyone that's been following along with our content, you might have seen this one before, but just as a reminder of investing in shares versus investing in property, and what the comparison is, and why property is such a solid investment. And what I've got here is that you have $100,000 that you invest into shares at 8.7%, and 8.7% is basically the 20-year average return on either the Australian share market or on a diversified international portfolio, pretty much. So in my view, that's, year to year, we know that shares sometimes go up and sometimes go down, and there is a lot of volatility in the share market. But over the long term, that's a very reasonable return to expect. And if anyone wants to learn more about that, there's a bunch of previous content that we've done specifically on shares and how you can do that. But just for today, I'm just keen to show you what the numbers actually look like. And essentially, if you put $100,000 into shares, at the end of the first year, you can have about $107,000. Then after the second year, that over years 2 to 10 rather, you put in $100,000 in total, and then you've got basically a total of $197,009 based on the compounding that happens over that previous time. And Tony's just asked the question, how do you get the previous content? We can happy to send some of that over links to access some of that off the back of the presentation, Tony. So then after year 20, you put in another 200,000 now, and you see that the initial 100,000 that you've got has now grown to 388,000. So you're starting to get some serious sort of J-curve type growth here. Year 30, we've got 764,000 now. In year 40, it's extrapolating out further. So you can see with shares that almost every 10 years, your investment is doubling. We started with 100. After 10 years, we've got almost 200. After 20 years, we've got almost 400. After 30 years, we've got almost 800. And then after 40 years, well, it's almost 1.6. Not perfect maths, but we see we're close enough to doubling that it's gives you an idea of the impact. Now, what I've done is I've contrasted this with a $500,000 property that's growing at 6.8%. And for the numbers people on the line, 6.8% is basically the 20-year return on Australian residential property. So again, if you choose a good property, and we're going to talk a bit about how you do that today, it's very reasonable for you to expect this sort of return moving forward, in my personal view, although we know that the past doesn't predict the future, and I was never here and this never happened. But in my personal view, I would expect that the numbers aren't going to vary too much, slightly looking forward over the next decades into the future. So yeah, then 20 years, we see that the property's almost $2 million now, 30 years, 3.8 million, 40 years, 7.5. And if you look at these numbers, I mentioned that the shares are doubling every 10 years. The property is pretty much doubling every 10 years as well, that we're almost $1 million, almost $2 million, almost $4 million, not quite, but almost $8 million. So pretty powerful stuff. But you see, if you've got $100,000 that you're in $100,000 in equity, or $100,000 in money that you've got in your offset, or whatever, that investing out into shares can make you a whole bunch of money. But if you use that to then go and buy a property, it's going to make you a bunch more money, because you've got, and it's the next slide, that you've got the power of leverage there as well. So it's worth noting out, and I had this feedback before, that it's not a perfect science, just going back to these numbers for a sec, because of course when you buy property, there are purchase costs associated with that, and mortgage costs and that sort of stuff. But you can see when you look at 1.5 million versus 7.5 million, you can see that there's probably quite a lot of room for you to cover all of those costs and still be enormously ahead. Just got a question from Abigail here. What is the comparison share growth at 500K comparing apples to apples? Well, the shares would probably win in that case, Abigail, because you see that the return on shares is slightly higher than the return on property. But what I've got here is that people don't buy a $500,000 property with $500,000 cash, or caveat to say, not many people buy a $500,000 property with $500,000 in cash. So yeah, if you've got $2 million in a pile and you're thinking, do I invest in property versus shares? Well, I'd probably still buy some property because I'd use the gearing. But if you didn't want to use any borrowing at all, then it's going to be very close. So, but what we're talking about today is really that we're talking about how do we use the property equity that you have or cash to basically get more. And the way that you do that is through leverage. You're very welcome, Abigail. So, I mucked up my slide magic here. But what I've also done here is to show the progression of house prices over. I found this report that went from 1993 to 2018, so over a 25-year period. With a growth rate of 6.8% essentially, and then extrapolated out to today. Looked at what the median house price is in Australia today. This is in Sydney, with these numbers. And then I've extrapolated out that growth rate to show you what you're buying a property today in 20 years' time. That the growth is actually even higher based on the growth that we saw then. So what I'm sort of getting at with this slide is that the sooner, like the longer you wait to get into the property market or to buy property, if you know you want to have an investment property as part of your overall investment portfolio, that the market just keeps running away. And yes, we do see, periods of growth which are followed by maybe some small declines or a bit of consolidation, but the property market just keeps going up. And while we don't know, and there has been some structural change off the back of COVID in particular, because everyone needs to own property, and because our population is growing, and because we're getting net migration, and because incomes are going up and inflation's going up and productivity is going up, these are all drivers of the property price and things that I don't believe are going to change considerably in the future. So I suppose this is a bit of a motivation to say, let's, if this is going to be part of your strategy, trying to make it happen sooner rather than later is going to do you some favors. So how you actually do this, how it actually works. So buying an investment property, I've just used a $1 million property number because I'm a little bit lazy and it makes my numbers nice and round, but it also makes it a bit easier to understand. You can apply this though, whether it's a $2 million property or a $500,000 property, the numbers are linear in nature. So if you want to buy a $1 million property, you need about $50,000 for your deposit minimum, right? So this is a minimum deposit based on bank rules, and that's a bit of a moving target. So just be aware that things do change. There's no, we saw a lot of change off the back of the Royal Commission. They tightened up the rules on borrowing. Now they've relaxed that a bit. Things will change again in the future, but rough rule of thumb is that you're going to need at least a 5% deposit to get into the market. You're going to need about $50,000 to cover your costs. This is state dependent. Again, stamp duty is one of the biggest costs in most states. So, it just depends on where you're based as to how much you pay. And I'm going to break down what some of those costs are so that depending on what state you're in, you can get a bit of a better sense of what it might look like for you. But about $50,000 in costs is a good rule of thumb. Now, if you buy with less than a 20% deposit, you're going to have to pay some lender's mortgage insurance. This varies from bank to bank and borrower to borrower and lending level to lending level, but it's a rough rule of thumb, again, about $20,000. So you're going to need a total of, say, about $120,000 to get into the market. To get into the market without paying lender's mortgage insurance or LMI, you need to put in a 20% deposit. So $200,000, you got your same $50,000 in costs, so you needed $250,000 in total. So how do we get there? How does equity release work? Well, if you say you want to buy this $1 million property, you want to do it without paying the lender's mortgage insurance. So you have $250,000 deposit plus costs. How it works is that you secure the equity, secure the initial loan one of the deposit and cost number of $250,000 against your current property. So if you've got a property that's got equity in it, then it's secured against the first property. And Equity is just the difference between the value in your property and how much you owe on that property. So if you've got a $1 million property with a $500,000 mortgage, that means you've got $500,000 of equity. The value less the loan amount is your equity. Now, the banks will lend typically up to 80% of the available equity on your property. So going back to that example, $1 million property, $500,000 loan, they would generally lend up to 80%. So that means you've got $300,000 of available equity, which is what could be used to secure this loan. Then once if you've got a $250,000 deposit, whether it's equity deposit or cash deposit, the banks will happily lend you up to 80%. So you just secure that against the new property that you purchase. So I need to caveat this by saying that you definitely need to be able to service your loan. So when you go to borrow, when you go to do an equity release loan, borrow to buy a property, the banks are going to do an assessment of your credit, of your payments, of your payment capacity, and you need to be able to do that. It doesn't really matter how much equity you have. The banks will always make sure that you're able to service the loan before they lend you the cash. But essentially, that's the sort of brass tacks of how equity release works. Now, what's driving those purchase costs that I mentioned before? There's stamp duty here of about 4% roughly. This is more in the New South Wales states, which is probably the highest stamp duty, a little bit less in some of the other states. Then you've got your legal fees and title searches. So building and pest inspections, conveyancing, having a property person to help you. And then you generally need to get insurance on the property, depending on the type of property that you purchase, that the banks want to make sure that you've got building insurance so that they're protected if something happens. Got a couple of questions here. Firstly, just what says, when banks work out how much you can borrow, do they take into account wage growth, or the assumption that your income will be the same over the 30-year life of the loan? Look, I think the short answer is that they really don't necessarily, they don't really do that, because what the banks are trying to do is make sure that you can service your property tomorrow. And then if your wage doesn't go up for, say, 5 years, then they want to make sure that you can service it over that period. They generally look at, they put a margin on the loan as well to say if the interest rates go up, and clearly we're in an ultra low interest rate environment at the moment, but if interest rates go up, are you going to be able to service it then? So it doesn't really matter if you've had significant wage growth in the recent past. I don't believe, and it's probably more of a question for a mortgage broker or a mortgage expert, but I don't believe that they factor that in, unfortunately. It's like they don't factor in other types of income. Like we do a lot of work with tech workers where they've got significant RSU or restricted stock unit income, where the company's giving them, companies like Apple and Google and stuff, they give their employees shares as part of their wage package. Also for commission-based workers or people that have overtime, I think that they want to see a really consistent history to be able to lend against that as well. I hope that one helps. Michelle says, hope this isn't a dumb question, but what do you mean by secure against? No, it's definitely not a dumb question, Michelle. What basically it means that if you think about lending, what the banks want to do is that they want to make sure that they're going to be able to get their money back. I'm just going to jump back to that slide, that they're going to be able to get their money back if you default on your loan. So if I go back to this scenario where you've got, say, a $1 million property, if the banks lend you $1 million or $1,050,000, and then you stop paying your mortgage, the bank will take possession of your property, and then they're going to have to go out into the market and sell that property. So if in that case, they're going to want to sell it quick, and they're probably going to have to sell it for less than $1 million, and therefore they're going to lose money off the back of that. Whereas if it was this scenario where there are two properties and you've got your original, I mentioned, $1 million property with a $500,000 loan, you borrow another $250 against it, that you only owe $750,000 on property one, on a $1 million property. And then you got another property that's you owe $800,000 on a $1 million property. If you default on your loan, the banks will take possession of both homes or loan or loans, and then they'll just sell the properties quick. And if they've got a $200,000 buffer, they probably just sell it for 900. That's going to be a bargain for someone in the market, given the value is 1 million. And then they get their money back quick. They pay their costs, and then they don't have to muck around. So it just means that the loan is that the bank's security or the title is linked to the property. That's actually a really good question, Michelle. Thank you for that. Another question, can you rely on rental income to help service a loan? Yes, you absolutely can. I think they do, shade that income a little bit. And when I say shade, I mean like if it's $10,000 a year or $50,000 a year, that they won't take the full sort of headline amount. They might reduce it by 20% or 30%. I think depending on the area as well. I think if you own regional properties where they know that the vacancy rates are a little bit higher, that means that there's a little bit more risk to the bank. So I think that they just shade it down or reduce that down a little bit more. So I hope that one helps. You're welcome, Michelle. No worries. A question from Fatima says, can we talk about LMI? Is that a good idea if servicing is not a problem, but the initial deposit is? Well, that's a great question, Fatima. Thank you for that. Well, look, I think you see that when we look back at, let me see if I can just go back there. If you look at the property growth rates that we were looking at here, or that, looking at the shares versus property stuff, that every year and it won't be true for every single year, but the longer you wait, the property market keeps going up. And if a property is going up at 6.8%, on average, then you're paying $20,000 to buy $1 million property, which is going to go up by 6.8% or $68,000 in a year. I think it can be totally fine. It depends on your situation, of course, and how quickly you're saving your deposit. So you need to look at that. But if it's going to take you a long time to save that next 50,000 or 100,000 that you need, then sometimes just sort of sucking it up a bit and paying some of those costs is okay. I should just say, though, that it is mission critical that you make sure that you're looking at not only getting into the property, but your ability to service the property beyond that purchase and your ability to do the other things that you should be doing or probably want to be doing around your wealth building. So things like your, paying down your mortgage, doing other investments, providing for if your situation's going to change in the future, kids' costs and all of that sort of stuff. So keep that in mind. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we plan as well. So thank you for that question, Fatima. So I mentioned it's the core purchase costs that are here, which is about 5%. Other costs that you might want to think about, lender's mortgage insurance, going back to what we were just talking about, up to 2%. Some cases a little bit more than that, depending on how much you borrow. So again, check with your bank at the time. Property buyer's agents, that's someone that finds properties and purchases them for you. So they'll go search the market. These people generally have relationships with real estate agents and other people like us. We have relationships that if we've got a client that's selling a property, sometimes we'll send it to the buyer's agents first, because that way they can put it out to their network and avoid paying the friendly local real estate agent their cost to sell. And the other thing that you might want to do is get a proper financial plan in place to make sure that you're making the perfect property decision. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that works when we get into the planning piece as well. Now, I've got an example here, and this is a bit of an interesting one that just shows the cost of actually running an investment property. And what I've got is basically the purchasing a property at a $700,000 level. Sorry, I should have put that up there. Mortgage cost $700,000 at 3% for someone that's on an income of $110,000. Now, this is actually a real life example that I that I had for a client of ours that their total expenses, including the tax that they pay on their income, was $60,000. Then they were paying rental income of $20,000 a year. These guys are actually, they had a property, were renting as well, because they didn't want to live in the property that they owned. Then looking at purchasing this property, mortgage costs ongoing of $21,000. Ongoing property costs, things like strata and stuff, of $7,000, and then rental income on the property of $28,000. You see that the interesting thing is that the income from the property of $28,000 cancels out the costs of the property, and the property purchase is essentially cash flow neutral. I should have probably put a comparison here against with no property, but you can see that basically the income less expenses outside of property is this $30,000 number, and then all the property purchase numbers are neutral. So look, this is different for every person, but what I wanted to show you guys was that you can actually purchase a property in a way that doesn't need to cost you very much cash flow at all. In some cases, nothing. And if you buy the right property, if there are tax deductions associated to it, it could even be something that is cash flow positive. It doesn't need to cost the world, but it's important that you do it in the right way, that you've got risk management and stuff in place. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. So some of the strategies to think about around property. Look, tax planning is mission critical when you buy a property. Tax for employee individuals or PAYG income individuals, i.e. not self-employed people, that there are very few ways to save money on tax. To put it a different way, the biggest way that you can save tax is through the way that you invest. So tax planning is really the most core part of the property purchase decision that you've got. Equity release, I've just spoken about that. That's another one which can be really good if you've got equity in your property, can help you to basically get into another property with no money eating into your savings. Negative gearing, you saw from that example that getting the tax deductions on the interest payments in your property can be a thing that helps you save tax as well. Again, ongoing property deductions that you get it gives you a little bit more ability to tax plan. If you've got maintenance work to do at the end of the financial year and you want to bring your tax down a bit, you can do that. You can also get deductions to, if you've got properties in the state to go and to have, travel and inspect the property and that sort of stuff as well, which is good. Look, one thing that you should be aware of as well is offset versus redraw. And this is something that a lot of people get wrong, and it ties really neatly into the using property equity to make money, where if you pay all of your money down on your, the common scenario that we see is where you've got a person that buys a property that they live in for a period of time, and they think they want to get ahead, so they smash down their mortgage as quickly as they can. They've got all this money in redraw, which they intend to in the future use to go purchase another property, maybe a bigger property, maybe something else for them to live in. Now, it's weird quirk in the tax rules that if you take money out of a redraw and then use it to buy a home that is not an investment, then the debt goes back up on your original property, but you aren't able to claim a deduction for the interest that you pay on that loan, because the purpose of that borrowing was to buy a home, which is not an investment. Whereas if you buy a property and you have a loan with an offset account, you can put as much money as you want into that offset, and it will reduce the interest that you pay while you live in that property. Happy days. And then when you take it out and go buy your home, the loan had never really changed. So the entire loan was used to purchase a property, which is now being used as an investment. And under the tax laws, that's what allows you to claim that property, claim that interest as a deduction. So it is really important to understand the difference between the two and make sure that you're using the right loan for what it is that you want to be doing. Another property strategy that you can use, and this is a property strategy that you can use to actually build equity in your property, where you basically set up a line of credit or a loan that's attached to your property, secured against the equity, as per what we were talking about before. Which is line of credit is like almost like a credit card, in that you can pull the when you might have $100,000 line of credit and it just says $100,000 available. If you take $1,000 out, then it says $99,000 available. How the debt recycling strategy works is that you pay down your mortgage, or put money into an offset that's attached to your mortgage more commonly. And at the same, you draw an equivalent amount out of the line of credit loan and put it into a share investment, managed fund, ETF, something like that. Now, because when you take that money out, the interest becomes deductible on the line of credit loan, and the after-tax interest rate on mortgage type loan is generally significantly less than the long-term return that you can expect on a diversified share portfolio. So you'd expect that your investment account increases at a faster rate than your loan increases on the line of credit. Then at a point, you can use sell your shares, pay down the line of credit loan, and then you should have a bunch of money left over that you can pay down your other mortgage faster, or tip into your offset to then go and buy your next property. So it can be a really powerful strategy. If you need to have equity in your property to be able to leverage this one, but it's one that it can allow you to get thousands or tens of thousands of dollars of tax deductions, and you grow your equity, pay down your mortgage at a faster rate. See a couple of questions. You got one from, just before we get into the strategy piece, from Izza. In that example, it seems like still costs because you're paying $20K extra in rent per year, right? Does that give you any tax exemptions? Well, yes, you are paying rent, but if you look at what is the actual cost of the property, the mortgage cost for $21,000 and the ongoing property cost was $7,000. So the total cost of living in that property would be $28,000 a year. So by renting instead of living in that property, you're saving $8,000 a year. And for this person in particular, they had a nicer house that they liked more by paying that $20,000 rent than the one that they had purchased as an investment, because of the nature of the property that they purchased. I hope that one helps, Izza. Alice says, how do the tax deductions work if you buy a part home, part investment, like you do a multi-bedroom property and rent out one or more rooms as well as living there yourself? Look, best to check with an accountant on this one. I think people structure this in different ways, but if you're living in a home, you don't get any tax deductions for the rent, and I'm not sure if you need to pay tax on the income if you rent rooms out. I'm not sure about that. Might want to check that with an accountant, but I think maybe not is the answer. If you do it the other way though, and you does it work? You have a home and you have a home office, and then you claim the deductions for the home office. Like if you got a separate granny flat that's built out the back or something, you can claim deductions for that portion of the debt. But then it gets really complicated with the capital gains tax, because your home is capital gains tax free, and investment property you pay capital gains tax on. So you got to sort of think about, is the juice worth the squeeze on that one? But yeah, it's a good question. Let me know the answer when you find it out, Alice. Yuki says, is offset account offered by the banks on a fixed interest loan? Typically not, although I have heard about one product recently where you can do that. But that's why one of the things that you want to be getting right when you purchase a property is that the mix between fixed rates and variable rates as well. So you definitely have them on offset accounts with the right product, with the right bank and the right loan on variable loans. But because fixed loans are fixed, then it means that you're sort of committing to locking that in for the period of time there. So again, goes back to that strategy, Yuki. Michelle, can you go in a bit more detail about the equity release? Well, okay, yeah, that's a good question, Michelle. Basically, it's like going back to that example that I said, where you have a $1 million property and you owe $500,000. You know that there's $500,000 of equity the banks will lend up to 80% of that. So they'll lend up to 800,000, which means that you've got $300,000 in, let's call it available equity. If you want to go and buy another property, you do your assessment with the banks and they say, okay, can you borrow the money that you want? How much money do you want to borrow? You say, I want to borrow $1,050,000. They say, can you afford to service that? Great. They say, maybe I've said that slightly the wrong way, but when they ask where you're going to get your deposit from, you say that you're going to take it from the equity that you've got in your current property. And then when they do the settlement on the property, they just that security thing that we were talking about before, they just secure the loan against the equity in the other property. And that's what's called an equity release. It's also like if you get a line of credit, like I was talking about that debt recycling strategy, that's also an equity release that you can say they'll lend you $100,000 against the equity that's in that property. And then that equity is essentially released. And you essentially no longer have the equity once you draw the money out of that loan. Gets a bit confusing, but I think guys, you want to go down this path, get a good mortgage broker. A good mortgage broker will help you understand these concepts. I say the caveat that you need to use a good mortgage broker, but that they can help you do that. Or if you choose to use a financial planner to do a property financial plan, then they'll step you through all of that stuff as well. So the strategy considerations that you want to be thinking about buying as an investor versus an owner-occupier, there is a difference because of the tax deductions there. And it's really, there's no one best way. I've helped a lot of people with this now, and really depends on your income, the strategy, the property price, all of those things, mortgage rates as well. So, but it is an important distinction, and everyone wants to live in their own home. I totally get that. You don't want to deal with the annoying property manager and have to move around all the time, but understand what the difference is, because if you don't run the numbers, then you're making the decision based just on the emotion of the purchase. And that's an important consideration, but it's not the only important consideration. So run your numbers and you'll have confidence that you're getting the right result. Think about the deposit. To some of the questions that we had before, how much equity do you want to release if you're using equity? If you are buying another property another way, how much deposit do you put in? How much are you leaving over for your emergency fund, for your ability to put in the offset account, all of those other things as well. And then where to buy. And this is a really big one. And it's something that I see a lot of people spend a lot of time on, I think I've got this in the mistakes section, which I'm going to come to in a sec, but people get so caught up in buying the perfect area when they're thinking, particularly when they're thinking about buying as an investment, that there's all this noise out there, this hotspot, this growth triangle, like all of these things. But if you stick to the fundamentals of growth and supply, then it's hard to go wrong. I was reading a report the other day that was talking about the new home, the locations of new homes being built in New South Wales, and what that showed is that in most of from the northern beaches, like right along the coastline and into the city and the inner west area, almost no new homes getting built, with the exception of a couple of growth pockets around places like Green Square and DY. But when you looked at the outer suburbs and the northwest in particular, there's a massive amount of growth going on out there, that there's tens of thousands of new homes being built. So if there's that much supply, it's just going to limit the growth on your property. It's as simple as that. Then you think about the demand and where people want to live. Close to the CBD is where the strongest population growth is expected. And if you've got those two things there, you've got strong population growth and you've got very limited supply, you're going to get it. You're going to be able to confidently invest, knowing that you're not, going to have to worry about mediocre returns or potentially losing money. When you start chasing these hotspots around the country, you're increasing your risk significantly. So understanding, those fundamentals and keeping your eye on those and not getting caught up in the shiny objects is generally a long way to making a smart property decision. The other thing that's really important, and this is a bit of a thing I realized in just a recent little while, that we've been working with a lot of people that want to buy, and especially partly because the property market has gone up so much in Sydney, that they're wanting to buy these homes that are quite expensive, you know, in the millions of dollars. And when you look at that, look at doing that, like they've got the money that they could do it, but when you look at that alongside their ability to do the other things that they want, it's just they just don't, they put themselves in a position where they're going to be unable to make the progress that they want and end up with this, you know, fantastic, amazing house, but with little other financial assets. And, you know, you can't eat bricks from your house. So you need to make sure that you've got other assets outside of your property that you are going to be able to deliver you an income at the time that you choose that you don't want to work anymore. So again, running your numbers here is going to be mission critical. Understand as well, if you're looking to purchase a bigger property, your dream home in the future, that there can be stepping stones to get there. It's not something, if you stretch yourself now, it can inhibit your progress in other areas. Whereas if you have a bit of patience and take your time, then it can be an easier pathway to get there. How to plan on property. So I'll run you quickly through this process. That is a process that we use when helping people, but it's also the process that basically any person needs to use if they want to be planning with their money. So essentially we start here on, let's focus in on, you know, what's most important to you. Understand, you know, if you're sitting down in 3 years' time, what does a great result look like when it comes to your money, when it comes to your property strategy more broadly? And then what are the key roadblocks or the issues, the things that are slowing you down or holding you back? That becomes a bit of a hit list for you in terms of action items, the things that you want to work on. Then you want to clarify all of the moving parts and the things that are going to impact your strategy, understanding what money's coming in, what money's going out, where's it going? Let's stress test that. Are we getting maximum value, happiness, enjoyment from that money? Is there some stuff that's crept in there that's actually not bringing us that much benefit that we can get rid of, that we can deprioritize to increase the priority around some of the things like saving? And, you know, money management is all about prioritization. You know, you want to get ahead financially. You want to live the best lifestyle that you can today. But those two goals come in a bit of conflict with each other, because the best strategy that you could follow is to save every single dollar that you earn, and, you know, eat baked beans for dinner and breakfast every day. But it's unlikely to be the right strategy for most people, because you've got to live a life as well. So it's about understanding, like, what are the most important priorities for you? And that's different for every person. For some people, it's the dog walker or the personal trainer or the, online subscriptions or whatever those things are, for travel. You know, for other people, it's like whatever else. So understanding what's there and what's going on so that you can make the best prioritization decisions for you is going to mean that you end up with the optimal strategy for you. You want to also, at this point, understand all of the other things that are in part of your strategy, you know, investments, your mortgages, debt, superannuation, what fees are you paying, how's it invested, all of those things. And then thinking about, and this is really important with property, thinking about how things are going to change over the foreseeable future. You know, if you're younger and thinking about maybe having children, starting a family, that comes with childcare costs, schooling costs, all of those sorts of things. Maybe you want to start a business, have some extended travel. Whatever those things are, that gives you the baseline that you can start to layer your property purchase decisions or other financial and investment decisions on top of. So from there, you want to map out those different strategies. So get the strategy, like understand what the numbers look like so that you can optimize between getting the financial results that you want and being happy with the things that you're doing in the life that you're living. Then break it all down. Once you've done that, break it all down into a really clear action plan where you know exactly what you're doing now, what's coming up, what are the 27 things to do for that you need to do to turn this awesome strategy into awesome results. Then you want to start doing those things, automate as much as you can, your savings, debt repayment strategy, investment strategy, and then execute it on an ongoing basis. So make sure that you're, checking in on your strategy, making sure that nothing's changed that means that you need to review your strategy. You know, things change really quickly. COVID was a perfect example of that. So you need to stay on top of things so you continue to get the very best results possible. Impact for COVID on planning is that, everything's changing so quickly. A lot of people think things like, think that property is out of reach or that they should wait or that there's going to be a crash or whatever. But Any one of these things may or may not eventuate, or that might be myths or things that you maybe not considering all of the ways that you can make things happen. So when you have a plan, and it's very unlikely that someone does a plan and chooses to do nothing off the back of that plan, but do the plan sooner so that you know that what you're doing and you have the confidence that you're doing the absolute best thing. Don't not act out of fear. Educate yourself and take the time to do your research so that you understand what's going on, and don't let fear be a barrier for doing stuff. Got to have a solid defensive strategy in place, especially, wage uncertainty, COVID, but also interest rates rising, a bit of an uncertain, weird time in the economy as well. And if things are complex, get help. The strategy part of that planning process that I just showed you in particular is quite challenging to do, the more stuff that you've got going on. So there are more ways that, getting good support is going to be able to add a bunch of value and help you with those decisions as well. Got a question from Derek here, which says, hey, can you buy an investment property and move into it in, say, 5 years' time? Will that change the type of loan you now require, i.e. investment to owner-occupied loan, and will the banks allow it? Look, I think the answer is that you definitely can buy an investment property and move into it. I think to be able to claim it, there's this thing called the 6-year CGT free rule. So that means that you can live in a different property and you claim another property as your primary place of residence and get this CGT exemption for a period of 6 years' time. So in order to access that, the property needs to be an owner-occupied property at least one point in time. So if you purchase a property and don't move into it for 5 years, that's fine. You can run it as an investment property. It's just that the capital gains that accrued over that period, you'll have to pay tax on in the future. If you buy a property and then move into it straight away and then move out, change your mind and move out after 6 months or 12 months, and then rent it out for 5 years, you would then be able to move back into it, and the property would be CGT free over that entire time. So I think, again, it goes back to strategy there. In terms of changing the type of loan, that's probably more of a question for a mortgage expert. I think that technically it's supposed to, but I've also had clients that have had the banks tell them that they don't need to change their loans from owner-occupied to investments when they move out. So I think it depends on the bank and your situation, but that's a good one to ask your mortgage broker when it comes time to do that. Property mistakes that people make. One thing that I should just call out is that you can only really manage the risk that you understand. And, there's risk in everything. Buying shares is risky. Buying property is risky. But ultimately, risk is what makes you money. So understanding, you're welcome, Derek, understanding where risk is coming from and how you can manage it. There's always going to be a bit of risk left over, but and for every person, you need to understand what is acceptable risk for you and what is unacceptable risk. So take the time to learn where all of those risks are coming from, or get someone to explain them to you, and then you can see how you can manage them, and then you can make an informed choice as to whether whether the risks are something that's acceptable for you or not. Offset versus redraw, I mentioned. Lifestyle risk, and that's the risk if you don't think about how your lifestyle is going to change over the foreseeable future and then go buy a property, you can end up in a situation where things change such that what could be a property could be a fantastic investment, but it could be a terrible investment for you because it's now stopping you from doing some other things that you want to do. So that's why it's so important to have that solid plan to make sure that doesn't happen. I've seen a bunch of really shitty stories with people that, it's not like they've blown up a heap of cash, but they've missed a huge opportunity that if they would have just, bought a property at a slightly lower value, they would have been able to afford it and still pay for the childcare and do the travel and look after the kids in the way that they wanted to without needing to sell the property. So it's an important one. Looking at choices in isolation, I touched on this briefly before, which is like looking at, is this a good property? That's not the most important consideration. You need to look at it as part of your broader plan. Looking for the best option, I mentioned that before as well. And look, I see in Sydney, which is a market I know, I don't know what will be the best suburb, but I can tell you that if you invest in Surrey Hills, Mossman, Bondi, like these desirable places that have strong growth and historically strong growth, very attractive for people to live in, the difference is not going to be considerably different over the next 20 years. And then getting the wrong advice. And this is something that's really common in the property space. There's way too many of these property spruikers that, push these strategies that they get people dazzled with all the money that they can potentially make. And then in the meantime, the advice person is making all these sweet commissions off the back of the property purchase. Make sure that if you use an advisor, whether it's a property buyer's agent or a financial advisor or a mortgage broker, make sure you ask them tons of questions until you feel totally comfortable, and do it as soon as possible so that you know before you jump in. You don't want to get too far down the path and have wasted a bunch of time and potentially a bunch of money without, because you didn't ask questions that you could have. If you would have asked sooner, you would have chosen a different path. So guys, look, in terms of next steps, look, I think the key here is that, there's no, the key to making, to getting great results with your money goes down to taking action. So, I think this quote from Derek Sivers, which is a great one that I use all the time, and it says that if information was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs. And it talks to the point that you don't need more ideas to get results. You need to take action, because action is what's going to deliver you outcomes. So guys, in terms of next steps, look, obviously I'm going to come to questions in a second. So for anyone following along, feel free to just pop your questions into the Q&A. But guys, look, if this is the sort of stuff that we do, so if anybody's sitting there, wants to sort of learn more about how getting some help with this stuff could sort of help, I'm happy to have a conversation. Basically, we do these 15-minute intro calls with our team, and they talk through what are the opportunities for you, help you understand next steps, and also if you choose to do some stuff to make it happen before tax time and take advantage there as well. So I've just popped into the chat box. If anyone wants to take advantage of that we're doing those at our cost, so that no cost to you there, just to really help you break things down and understand, what the opportunities are, and is there something that you can be doing. Now, obviously we help people on a formal basis as well, but I'm very happy that I know that sometimes people just need a nudge in the right direction to move things forward. So if that's you, please feel free to get involved as well. The link's just in the chat box there. And now happy to run through any questions. I got one here from Alice. Alice says, "Hey Ben, just wondering how much roughly is the base cost of getting this good advice? Are there different kinds of advice you can get, different prices, or is a financial plan all of a similar price point?" Look, that's a really great question, Alice. I think that there's a whole so there are 20,000 financial advisors in Australia, and all advisors do things a little bit differently. Some people that are called financial advisors might just sell life insurance. So I think if you're looking for a financial advisor, if you look at their financial services guide, it will tell you what are the areas that they're able to provide advice on. But more importantly, it's like helping if you're talking to someone, help understand what areas they help people with. Now, if you just need an income replacement policy, using someone that has an income replacement that just does insurance is going to be totally fine. But if you're looking for someone to do a really thorough, robust financial and property plan, then it's more involved, more time, more resources that go into it. So to answer your question directly, there's no one cost, but I would say that probably at this level, you're looking at maybe maybe $3,000 ish or something as a base cost if things are fairly simple, and then the cost just sort of goes up from there. The good thing is that depending on what areas you want advice on and your situation as well, that it's in some cases some of the advice fees can be paid through superannuation, because one of the sole purposes of super is to provide for your retirement in the future. So if your plan's based around that, then it can be part of it that you can pay through super. Also, depending again on exactly what you're doing, part of a working with a financial advisor can be tax deductible to you as well, against investment income if you're looking at doing investing as part of your plan as well. So it's a bit like how long is a piece of string, but and I think one thing that I'd also say on that is just understand, like if you want a high level surface level plan, that's one thing. But if you want a financial plan that's going to actually, deliver results, and someone's going to take the time to stress test your whole situation and get right in your grill and help you nut out a whole bunch of things that then there's more involved. Like there are some companies that will deliver a financial plan for $500, but it's like if you're walking down the street and saw a Ferrari on sale for $500, then you think there's something wrong with that Ferrari. And it's often with those things, and going back to the wrong advice thing, it's where people are getting paid from other sources or kickback sometimes, or they've got related party businesses as well. So again, just think through what you want and the results, because in my opinion, doing it in a detailed way, and that's why we do it that way at Pivot, is that we want to deliver results, because there's no point having a pretty shiny financial plan that doesn't actually do anything. You want something that's going to make it work and make you money. One more question from Jay, and then I'm going to hand it back over to Kate. Hey, if you can't afford to purchase property, what are the other options where I can find more information about other options? Jay, we'll shoot around a note. I'll shoot around a note, and I'll give you some links out to some content off the back of today as well. Alice, quick answer on this is that financial plans can't be set and forget, because everything changes so quickly. What you want changes, what's going on with your money changes, and what's going on in the world changes. So it can be, sometimes something you can manage yourself for a period of time, but when things change, you probably just want to be changing your plan. But guys, thanks for all the questions. That was really great. I hope you found that helpful. I'm just going to hand it back over to Kate. And yeah, guys, I'll catch you next time.
Hi, everyone.